my awesome students. So today we are moving on to earth science. We are going to be talking about what we're going to call our WED processes, and the W is going to stand for weathering, the E is going to stand for erosion, and the deposition, and the D is going to stand for deposition. Okay, so we are going to talk about those three processes tonight. So be prepared to talk about all three and show me the motions that go with each one. Okay, so you should be on page 64 and 65 in your journal. Today in class we glued down a reading and then our notes organizer. Okay, the reading you can read and highlight on your own. It'll only help you understand these vocabulary even more. And then tonight, as you watch the PowerPoint and listen to me teach, you're going to fill in each section of your notes organizer. So let's get started. Okay, so before we start talking about WED, first let's review what we are going to call rapid changes to the Earth's surface, okay? Rapid is just a fancy word for saying quick or fast. Rapid changes, they usually occur with no warning. So that's a volcano, an earthquake, a landslide, a hurricane. Those rapid changes can come in very quickly and completely change how our land looks. Okay, but those are what we call rapid changes. Okay, in 5th grade, we focus on what we call slow changes. And our slow changes are our WED processes. Okay, so let's look at our WED processes. First, let's look at all of these pictures. Okay, what do all of these pictures have in common? Okay, if you look at them, they are all part of our land. All of these are landforms that are found all over our country, all over our world. Okay, it's the surface of the earth. Okay, the surface of the earth is covered in land, and all this land looks different. Okay, well, what causes our land to look in these different ways? It's the natural forces that exist on our earth. Okay, wind, water, waves, and ice. Those forces of the wind and the water and the waves constantly hitting the land is going to change them. But it's going to be a very slow change. And those slow changes are caused by WED, weathering, erosion, and deposition. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at those processes. Okay, so our slow changes that are going to change our Earth's surfaces are weathering, erosion, and deposition. And these happen over many, many, many years. Okay, it's not like a volcano or a hurricane or a landslide. These are slow processes where we can't really see the effects with our own eyes because they happen over years and years and years and years. Okay, first one we're going to look at is weathering. Okay, weathering is the breaking down of rock into sediments. Sediment is just a tiny, tiny piece of rock like sand or clay or gravel. Okay, those are sediments. Those tiny pieces of rock came off of a bigger piece of rock at one point. Okay, so mirror. Weathering, the breaking down of rock into sediments. Weathering, the breaking down of rock into sediments. Okay, mirror off. When we say weathering, we're going to do a silly little dance, and we're going to go break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down. Okay, so let's try that. Mirror words. Weathering. Break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down. Mirror off. Okay, weathering is when the actual rock breaks off of a bigger rock. Like this picture you have right here. Okay, you have this water, it's constantly hitting and crashing onto this big piece of rock. Every time that force of the water crashing against the rock is going to take little pieces of rock off of it. And then those little pieces of rock are going to fall back into the water. Okay, wind, the water, or even the wind hits the rock, breaks a piece off. That is called weathering. Okay, so weathering is when rocks break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down. And rocks can break down because of wind or waves or water or even ice. Any of those things, when they hit those rocks, can break tiny pieces off. Okay, so that's our first WED process, weathering. Our second WED process, the E, is for erosion. And erosion is the movement of sediments from one place to another. Okay, so first in weathering, it broke off, right? Okay, so then when the sediment breaks off of this rock, it might fall into the water. The water is going to carry it. When that sediment is moving in the water or it's moving in the wind, it's moving from one place to another. When it's actually moving in the air or moving in the water, we call that erosion. Okay? Weathering is when it broke off. Erosion is when that same piece of sediment gets picked up by the wind, gets picked up by the water, and gets carried to another place. It's when it's actually moving. Okay? So mirror words. Erosion. Move it, move it, move it. Move it, move it, move it. Mirror off. Okay? So erosion is when the sediment is moving, move it, move it, move it, move it, move it. Okay? So weathering, break it down, break it down. Break it down, break it down. Erosion, move it, move it, move it. Okay? Our last wed process is the D, and the D stands for deposition. Okay? Deposition has this word in it called deposit. Sometimes you might hear your parents say they're going to go deposit their money into the bank. They're dropping their money off at the bank, right? They're putting their money that they earned into a new place. Deposition is when those sediments that were broken off, then carried away, get dropped into a new place. Eventually the wind's going to stop blowing, the water's going to stop moving, and that sediment's going to have to go somewhere, and gravity is going to take it and pull it down wherever that force may stop. Okay, so deposition is when those sediments drop off in a new place. Okay, here we have some sand dunes, and this is what we call a delta, and then this is a sand dune. The wind has blown all the sediment here, and then the sediment drops and forms these sand dunes. In a delta, the sediment flows down the river. The river starts to slow down and stop. When the river slows down and stops, all the sediment gets dropped. And that forms this triangular shape of land called a delta. Okay? So, mirror words. Deposition. When sediments drop off in a new place. When sediments drop off in a new place. Okay? Mirror words. Deposition. Drop it. Drop it. Drop it. Drop it. Okay? Mirror off. All right, so those are our wed processes that are going to slowly change the Earth's surface. Okay, it's always changing, and it's because of wed. Okay, weathering, break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down. Erosion, move it, move it, move it, move it, move it, move it. And deposition, drop it, drop it, drop it, drop it. Okay. Those three processes are going to affect how our land looks, and there are four main causes of wed. Okay, so weathering, erosion, and deposition can be caused by the wind. It can be caused by water. It can be caused when those waves crash on the shore, and then it can also be caused by ice. Okay, wind, water, waves, and ice can cause sediments to break down. They can cause sediments to move. And they can cause sediments to drop. Okay, so tomorrow we are going to investigate more about our wed processes and see some models of it in action. We are finished with the notes for the night. If you would like to stay tuned, I'm going to talk a little bit about how wed was in my summer trip to California and Arizona. So if you would like to stay tuned, I'm going to show you some pictures from my trip like you see here, and some video, and we're going to talk about how weathering, erosion, and deposition was in action in all of these places. So either stay tuned, or if not, have a wonderful, wonderful night, and I will see you tomorrow. Okay, so thank you for staying tuned for this part. So I will show you a couple of videos from when I was in California and Arizona this summer. Okay, so let's look at this first one. Okay, so this is in Malibu, California, and you can see you've got the beach, and you've got lots of rock formations, and the beaches in California are all along big walls of cliffs, as you can see right there. And that water is constantly rushing up on the beach, on the shore. It's constantly hitting some of the cliffs on this side and these rocks that are kind of within the water. And every time the force of that water hits those rocks, it takes and breaks and weathers a little bit of sediment off. Okay? So weathering is happening in California every single day. When the water and the waves from the beach crash up on that shore or crash up on that rocks, it breaks off pieces of rock, which we call sediment, and then those pieces of sediment fall into the ocean. And those pieces of sediment that fall into the ocean, the water's going to carry it, isn't it? Okay? So after it's broken off and weathered, then erosion's going to happen. And those tiny pieces of sediment that broke off are then going to be carried away in the water, or even if it's a windy day, some of the sediment might be picked up and carried in the wind. So you have erosion happening here as well. And then what happens when the ocean is carrying that sand, right? And then that sand is in the water, the waves brush up on the shore, crash onto the shore. Some of that sand from that water is going to go back onto the beach, and it's going to drop it off. So that's deposition. So you have weathering here, you have erosion here, and you have deposition here. Okay, so this shows us all three of them happening every single day. Now, we don't always see the effects of it, in the moment, but after a year, 2 years, 3 years, 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, these seawall, these sea cliffs, and these sea arches and these rocks in the ocean, they're not going to look the same because wind and water are constantly hitting it and breaking sediment off and taking it away. Okay, that is WED in action. Okay. Okay, so here you can see it a little more close up. Okay, so look at the water constantly hitting these rocks. Okay, how do you think this arch formed right here? Okay, this arch formed because the waves are constantly hitting it and breaking stuff off. And that constant breaking of it off, weathering, is going to cause those rocks to change how they look. Okay, and then you can see it. Look at all that sand traveling in that water. That sand is being eroded. Okay, that sand is being carried away. Okay, and then some of it drops right back up onto the shore. Here it is a little bit more up close. Okay, look at all that sand in that water being eroded and carried away. And then look at, you can even see the waves hitting some more of those rocks that are in the ocean. Okay, and then some of that sand is going to be dropped off back onto the actual beach. Okay, but this is water and wind in action, changing those landforms. That's how this little sea arch, is what we're going to call it, was formed over many, many, many years. The wind, the water, the waves crashed upon it, broke pieces off, carried it away, and then dropped some off somewhere else. We have WED in action. Okay, so here we have the Grand Canyon. I went here this summer. This video was taken from a helicopter. Okay, but you can see you've got, look at all the land and how it's shaped. Okay, the land didn't start off that way. Okay, erosion and weathering have basically carved out this canyon to make it look the way it does. Wind is constantly hitting it. The Colorado River flows through it. Okay, and that the erosion of the water flowing and constantly hitting that surface of the land is going to cause it to change a little bit by, again, our WED processes. Okay, so here's one more. Here's the beach in California. What's happening when these waves and the water hits the land? It's dropping all the sand back off onto the shore. That is called deposition. So sometimes some of the sand's going to come back and drop off. Sand is a sediment. And then sometimes the waves are going to actually pick some of it up and erode it back into the water and bring it to a new place. Okay, so this is just a little bit about, weathering and erosion and deposition in action. I saw it all around me this summer in California and in Arizona when I went to the Grand Canyon. So it's pretty cool. But WED, it is happening every second of every day, all the time. We just don't always see the effects of it until years have passed by. Okay, so hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you tomorrow. Thanks for sticking around.